Hi guys, my name's PK, and here I have Owen Rask, the founder of Rask Media. If you don't already know his podcast, you will soon because he gets almost 500,000 downloads per month across his different podcasts on Spotify and iTunes. So I reached out to him. It was me kind of having a fan moment and saying, "Oh, look, Owen, I listen to your stuff. It's really cool. It would be amazing to bring your valuable knowledge and experience and put it in front of my audience because they will get so much benefit." And he very, very, very kindly said yes. So this episode is going to be hopefully really, really good. I'm personally looking forward to it. We'll be deep diving financial literacy. We're not going to give you the answers, somewhat disappointingly, but I think more importantly, we're going to teach you, or rather Owen, and this discussion, how to learn how to learn. I think that is an incredible skill and attribute and trait to have to actually make money in any field of life. So without further ado, thank you so much, Owen.
Thanks, VK. I really appreciate you reaching out to me. Yeah, I mean, I could say the same thing about you and what you've created. So I'm just happy we both get to help people. Isn't that wonderful? So thanks for having me today.
It's really cool. It's really cool. And I sort of know about your background because I did a lot of research and I listened to other podcasts. But for other people's benefit, could you just go into like your background in term, and especially like to do with money? Because people will listen to your podcast, they'll see you and assume that you've been some sort of like financially literate person your whole life, but it wasn't that way all the time, was it?
No, that's right. So I grew up in outskirts of Melbourne towards the Yarra Valley. We had a farm there, a family farm. But my parents, neither of them were interested in money necessarily. Um, Basically, like I through high school, I spent a lot of time working, putting like basically like not fending for myself, but you could probably say that was close to it. And I had this huge anxiety about money always growing up. So my grandparents were survivors of the Holocaust, came to Australia, and that kind of rippled through the generations. But yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to go to a Catholic school, not a private school, but a Catholic school, and I got a kind of pretty good education. And I was just completely lost, didn't know what I wanted to do, and money was the furthest thing from my background. And we're out of school. I got admitted into the Special Forces Direct Recruitment Scheme, which is the only I guess, pathway into the special forces in Australia from civilian life. And basically, what was happening, PK, is I was basically like running away from a lot of the issues that I had. So a lot of the kind of like the anxiety and things that I was trying to solve for just by removing them, and it didn't really work. And basically came back to Australia. Came back to Melbourne and from the army, and like I just didn't know what to do. So I was vaguely interested in money from like an investing context because I knew that it was like a massive point of anxiety. So I wanted to solve that in my life. And I was fortunate that my friend who was studying nursing at the time subscribed to this newsletter called the Motley Fool. And most people will be familiar with, it's like a stock recommendation service, but it just launched in Australia. And they say that the first place, like the first job that you get out of school is the most influential in your worldview and where you end up going in your career. And that's absolutely true. I was so blessed that we found the Motley Fool because they sent out an email that said, we're looking for freelancers to write for us. Just anyone can write for us. And so my mate and I, we thought, well, chances are they're probably not looking for too many writers. So what we'll do is we'll put it all under his name and we'll both write together. We'll write these articles on shares and investing, and hopefully one of us gets admitted. And then after a few weeks or a couple of months, I can't remember, we said to them, we confessed our sins. We were saying, it's actually both of us writing, and we would love it if Owen could write under his own name. And so we started writing for the Motley Fool. And, lo and behold, we were basically kind of like the fourth and the fifth people through the door, even though we were freelancers. And the Motley Fool is this big mothership globally. And we basically saw that business go from like just like a humble WordPress blog into a business capable of generating tens of millions of dollars in free cash flow or profit within just a few years. So extraordinary growth. And that was kind of like where my fascination for investing in technology caught on. I finished my Bachelor of Technology, did 2 master's degrees, a bit of the CFA exam. And, I hold all this time, like I believe that education was so important, financial education was so important, but no one did it. Like you click on the web page on a bank's website, like you go to Combank or something, like you click education, and it's basically just like, here's a personal loan or a credit card. It's like, it's not education, it's actually just marketing. It's complete bullshit, to be honest. And so I thought, well, someone's got to do something about this. So in 2017 or thereabouts, I set on starting what would eventually become Rask, which is the business that you see today. And I remember one of the earliest pieces of advice I got when I was chatting to another founder was like, every business is an overnight success in 10 years. And basically, what you see today is like most of my hair's now gone. It's taken
okay
its
to me.
toll. Yeah, from this angle, it's got like a good lights. But that's basically it, right? And so fast forward to today, yeah, we've got 20,000 students who have enrolled in our free courses or our mostly free courses. We've got, they said, 150,000 podcast listeners, tens of thousands of readers, subscribers, heaps of different stuff. And if you think about my roots, like I was just an absolute mess. I remember saying that when we had our first big, what we call Rash treat, which is like a retreat where we go away, I just said, like, this business is built on my anxiety about money. And I think a lot of I'm not going to say I'm an entrepreneur, but a lot of good entrepreneurs that I deal with, what I find, mate, is that most of them have some type of imbalance that drives them to, I guess, remove that imbalance. And it could be small or it could be something really profound. But mine was definitely like I had a huge amount of anxiety and a huge amount of fear. I remember when I had to just get a tax file number, I was like, they're not going to give me one. As in, like, whoever they are, they're not going to give me one. Why would I deserve a tax file number? And lo and behold, now, it's a totally different story. And I'm so blessed for that.
Amazing. I kind of really do resonate with that whole anxiety story. You mentioned this concept of people who become entrepreneurs, presumably somewhat successful, have an imbalance. I've never heard anyone really talk about that in detail, but as you mentioned it, I could kind of relate it to myself because I wasn't I didn't grow up with a lot, and I almost had this unhealthy imbalance of I must be better financially speaking than others, and that was like my driving
Hmm.
force to become a banker and this and that. It was like totally unhealthy. Like that's very like toxic to want to be better than others, but that was my mindset, like that, let's be honest, and it was an imbalance in something, right? Like money anxiety. What did that mean for you beyond the text file number, which is of course like a symptom? What was the underlying like conflict or friction within your mind or within your heart that led to that?
Well, I guess, and I know a lot of people listening or watching this will relate to this idea of like imposter syndrome. So my journey through to the finance industry was that I worked for the Motley Fool, funny sounding name. It grew hugely. I made a lot of money just as a contractor. And yet I still had this fear of like, I'm going to lose my job. I don't have enough money. Um, I'm kind of like almost destitute. Like if I don't do it now, like no one else is going to protect me and no one else is going to help me because I mean, there are a lot of family issues that I had been dealing with, like a lot of family issues. Like I come from a broken family. Um, I I didn't really have a relationship with my dad for a while. I I saw my mum go through a lot personally, but also within our family while providing for us. My brother going through a lot of issues, and so a lot of the times I felt that I was kind of alone, and I felt that I I was like a team. Like it wasn't the case, but I felt like constantly that I was a team of one, while at the same time feeling like I wasn't worthy of being able to have money or to be successful. And so basically, I remember when I was younger, I said to myself, this is when I was really young. I said to myself, I don't really care what I do. I just want people to value my opinion. And I kind of did that because I ended up now with all these podcasts and all these channels and this media business, you could say, and it's kind of turned out that way. But I remember that kind of be like the driving force. It was almost like I needed the external validation. I call it like two compasses. It's like an external compass that points to something. It's like all the materialistic, the stuff that you kind of that drives you externally. It's like there's north and south, and you know which way to go. But then internally, I needed. It's almost like I needed that. I needed the validation from outside of me to prove to myself internally that I was worthy.
Mm.
And now I realize it's completely the other way around, ideally. And that was kind of the driving force. And we call this in personal finance or financial wellness, we call this a limiting money belief. So this idea that you have a belief about money, whether it's inherited from your environment or maybe it's passed down to you, and you use that as like a basis to inform your financial decisions. And it's quite profound, and not a lot of many people talk about this enough. Unfortunately, that I've got a really good team around me, including my co-host Kate Campbell. She's huge into this sort of stuff and really getting to the bottom of why people make certain decisions, but not just why we make the decision. What were the steps that led us to making that decision, which is, I think, really important.
So what would be for people who are in that similar boat as yourself, where I can say I was a similar boat as well, where I needed the external validation to feel whole, but then when you do feel that your cup is full, you realize that you know that was just like the most screwed up thing ever. For people who are in that boat, what have been the wrong steps, perhaps, that you've seen or that you've experienced or that your watchers or listeners have shared with you? You know, what are the things that has led them down into traps or like dark alleyways?
That's really a way to put it. So, a lot of us, there are the obvious ones. Like a lot of us are guided by material objects. So, like shiny objects, right? We see a car on the street, and our friend has a car. We're like, wow, that's a really cool car. Like, man, cool. Like you're cool. All this sort of stuff, right? And what actually happens is the really interesting case of psychology here is actually when we look at a car and we see someone drive past, we're like, wow, we're not actually looking at the person that drives it. We're looking at the car and we imagine ourselves driving that car. And so if you think about that for a moment, if you're the person that has bought that car and is driving it, you're assuming people are looking at you. This is an external validation piece, but no, they're not actually looking at you. They're looking at the car. And so there are a lot of instances where that happens. And financially, like on a spreadsheet, I can tell you for sure that a car is by far probably the worst investment anyone will ever make. So like there's nothing really good about that from a financial perspective. So we have this kind of shiny object syndrome where we look at that and we go, oh, wow, like that's pretty, that's a bad thing in multiple ways. By all means, you need a car to get around and whatever. But, that's probably like the really obvious ones where people buy materialistic things. You might spend an excessive amount on like personal health or, like makeup or hair care products or things like that, where that doesn't really matter. That stuff doesn't really matter. But we think it does. Now, those types of spending things are completely fine. I would always like hit myself every time I spent money on something that I thought was a want and not a need. And now I realize that you can have the fancy car, you can spend all that money on shoes or clothes, whatever, but you just need to spend with intention. So you need to know that, hey, it's actually not that rational. You probably see this all the time in property where people, they buy emotionally and they justify logically. And that happens a lot with money. But the big thing is, and this is what I find with, like, I've chatted to many billionaires on our shows and people that are like hyper air quotes successful, PK. I'm doing the air quotes for people that aren't watching, air quotes successful. And it really grinds my gears that when we put people up in the newspaper or on TV and we say, the most successful people, it's based purely on financial wealth. And that says nothing about the other things which are far more important. And one of the things that's really important, and this is the mistake that I made, is that when you can't control the outcome of something, you shouldn't judge yourself on that outcome. So what I mean by that is, if, say, for example, you make an investment, say with your community, they buy an investment property, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the investment property goes down. Now, you shouldn't anchor yourself to the outcome of that, because the outcome wasn't necessarily, maybe it wasn't in your control. Maybe council changed the zoning, or there was some sort of road, or there's crap neighbors, who knows? Maybe it burns down. I don't know. So you've anchored your happiness and your kind of value to that thing which you can't control. And so I was doing that a lot of the time by focusing on these external compasses, trying to get people to like me based on what they thought of me. But I have no control over what they thought of me. I had only control over what I felt inside. And there's this really interesting thing, like people will say this, is that, so you need some money and you need some health basically to be happy. Like you need to have a good like health, good diet, get your sleep, do all that sort of stuff. But then you also need a certain level of income, enough, right? But if you start earning excessive amounts of income, you'll find that the happiness, and the studies that show that anything basically over about 80,000 then starts to fall away until about 150,000. This was based on a few years ago numbers. It's probably gone up thanks to inflation. But once you get to that sort of level of income, it has no bearing on increasing happiness. And
Yeah.
so I was thinking, well, if I earn more, I'm more successful in business, I'm going to be happier. And so my mistake was that, when it's truly not the case. And Marshall Goldsmith, who's this fantastic executive coach in the US, he basically says that you need alignment between like your aspirations. So what, like the why you do something, the ambition, and like what you want to achieve, and your day-to-day activity or the process. So you need kind of alignment between those three things.
Mm-hmm.
So the long-term higher purpose, the goals, and also what you're doing each day. Whereas a lot of people just focus on getting stuck down in what they do each day. They don't think about, well, why am I actually doing this? I'm
Yeah.
just trying to survive. So I made that mistake.
Right. What what I'm kind of getting, I'm trying to apply this in my own life and learn as we have this conversation. And what my brain kind of just sprouted out was that in my own situation, I'm finding that it's no longer about the money, but per se, but it's still about the money in terms of the achievement that goes with it. So if I make X amount a month or X amount a quarter or X amount a year, I'm never going to spend it. Like, like you said, the happiness, flatlines, it tops out. But I'm still addicted, not to making the money or not to having that, oh, I have X amount in the bank, but just the achievement of it, just this like the adrenaline of like going for it. Of course, aligned to my why and my purpose and helping people, hopefully.
Mm.
But and I'm not sure if that addiction to achievement is happiness. So my question to you was, you mentioned that on your show, you've had many billionaires and things like that. This is a genuine question from me. Have you found that, of course, they're billionaires, so money no longer matters. Are they also addicted to achievement, or like, why are they still going? Or are they just such nice people that the product or service they have is changing lives? So they're like just devoting their entire being to it.
Um, I'm just trying to think of the three that I have the best experience with. Probably would be Hamish Douglas, the co-founder of Magellan, um, the Milner family, who run Washington H. Soul Pattinson, and a guy called Dr. Sam Huppert, who's the co-founder of Pro Medicus, the most successful Australian technology company over the past 15 or 20 years. All three of these people or families were just like you and me. They're exactly the same. They have the same issues. They talk about things. I remember we had an event last year in Melbourne, and Sam was kind enough to join us, and very open and honest guy. You can go and Google Pro Medicus share price, and you'll get a sense of who this guy is and whatever. And at the end of the show, he stayed for the whole event. He rocked up, and he comes up to me and because we give away free books at our events. Like, we gave away thousands of dollars worth of books. Maybe it's like $6,000 worth of books at this event. And he come up and he's got all the books under his arm. He's like, oh, I just want to say this is an amazing event. I absolutely loved it. I'm going to give all these books to my daughter. Right. Here's a guy that could probably buy the building. And he's taking the free books, and he's going and he's giving this, all these books, and he just wants to pass on this idea of financial literacy and trying to be, interested in psychology and money. And, he has the same things that we have. And if I look at all of those three examples, all of them don't really drive flashy cars. Although I did make a joke about Sam's flashy car, and he didn't necessarily like that too much. But if you all of them like are really humble people. They're probably some of the nicest people I've met, and yet they still drive like secondhand cars. They just do the same things, have the same struggles that we have each and every day.
Yeah.
And yet we, as the general population that aren't in that bracket, we just think, wow, if I get to that. And that's once again like us kind of aspiring, but without the why. And I'd say for you, like, if you're saying to me, well, hey, Owen, like, I'm driven by this thing, that is completely cool. One of the things that I know is that I am not driven by money at all. Like, I have no, like, I'm sure I just want to like to live, but I am not driven by money. I couldn't care less. Like, I seriously, if you find someone that cares less about money, let me know, because I will challenge them. But I'm a finance guy. I'm in this industry and
Yeah,
whatever.
that's like a weird paradox, you know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah.
saying?
And but when I see those people, so it's when I interview people for like a job or something, they're like, "Oh yeah, Owen, you're not going to like me because I'm motivated by money." I'm like, you
Mhm.
know what? That's super cool. I love that, because if you're driven by money, at least I know what you really value. It's the people
Mm.
that I don't know what they value that I'm more concerned about joining the team. And I just think if that's what motivates you, go and do it. You're not hurting anyone by like focusing on money. And
Mm.
I think it's a pretty pure motivation, to be honest, because it does open a lot of doors. It gives you, I think, the ultimate value of money is as a form of currency for freedom. So, like, the more of it you have, the more you
Mm.
can trade for freedom. And so, for people that want more control over their life and choice, Morgan Housel, who's the author of Psychology of Money, who I was fortunate to interview, he has this line that it's basically like money basically gives you the option to do what you want, when you want, and with who you want. And if you think about that, that's the ultimate drive. And so if money is a means to that, sure. But if money is also has a higher purpose to you in that it's actually the thing that I want, absolutely go and do that. And I would say go and make as much money as you possibly can. Like, go and do that. And the problem is, PK, is just not a lot of people do that. A lot of people don't know that money is their motivating factor.
Yeah.
A lot of people get stuck in their job and they're like, oh, I hate my job. And you're like, well, why do you do it? They're like, oh, I do it for the money. I'm like, well, are you motivated by money, or are you motivated by something else? Like, a lot of people aren't really that motivated by money. A lot of people would rather just take a 20% pay cut and do something they love and work from home a few days a week and have a good boss. And they don't make that choice. And I just think
Yeah.
that it's just inertia that pushes people forward.
Living with intentionality, like what you're saying is, it's almost like, how some friends are for seasons. You can be like really good friends for like 5 years, 6 years, but then through no fault of anyone, you just kind of go apart, and then maybe you might come back together in another few years' time. So, some friends, not all, but there are certain types of friends or relationships rather we have that are, for amount of seasons. And I feel that same with money. Money just energy. And, you might have a season where you're really motivated by it, but then you kind of cap out. You're like, after a while, like, this doesn't mean anything to me. But you had to have gone through that for you to have got to that realization. And I love it. And everyone always listens to people on shows, and you've said the exact thing that everyone says, which is money is a currency to buy freedom. But what I find, Owen, is like for people who are listening or watching, maybe they're making 100K per annum, they're making 80K per annum, maybe they're making 200K per annum, they've got a couple of kids or one kid, or they're just not happy with their life, or they're not happy with their financial life. When they hear a statement like that, and then they hear of those billionaires, it's like, oh, I want to be them. I want to be at least like them. I want to achieve that freedom. But then it's like, what do I do next? I remember
Mm,
when I was at high school, I was like Googling like how to make money. And I went through this rabbit hole of like e-commerce. And like the more I got into e-commerce, it's like, a can of worms. It was just, oh my God, this is like so frustrating. There's too much to learn. There's too many options. I don't know who's scamming me or who's legit. And so I feel that even now, for people who are watching or listening to this, they're like, okay, well, I get that's the principle, but I don't know how to build a bridge to that outcome. I don't have time, or I don't have energy, or even if I have those two ingredients, I just don't know what to do. Like, what am I meant to do? Just watch YouTube
mm.
all day? Like, this is a really difficult question, but what's your kind of response to that, or how do you think about that?
No, no, I actually think it's the key question. Is like, how do you find the North Star, right? You just look up and you don't know which one you're looking at. Like, how do you find the right one that's going to guide you? And the answer is it's not a quick process. So the answer to this, the best answer that I've got anyway, is that you need an opportunity for introspection. And so a lot of people don't stop and think, what am I doing? And why am I doing it? And because we don't actually know, we don't actually have the toolkit to, by design, to think like this. So what I would imagine you to do, what I would encourage you to do is just on a piece of paper, is just to on one side have all the things that you like, and then all the other things on the other side that you dislike. And so for me, that's like, I like animals, like I like being around nature. I like being in the fresh air. I like having space around me. I don't like the hustle and bustle. I don't really like pollution. I don't really like being in crowded places all the time. And I don't really like being in places where creativity isn't rewarded. And so those are just some little things off my list, right? But they could be literally like, I like inner city living. I like live music. It could be anything, right? And what you do once you get that list of like dislikes and likes, go away for a few weeks, come back to it and be like, okay, now what are the things that I can do? How can I do more of these and less of these? And there's another activity you can do, which comes from Ramit Sethi, but then we've kind of customized it a bit, which is like the 10 things activity, which is just you write down all the things you spend the most time on in one column. And then in the next column, all the things you spend the most money on. And in the final column, all the things that bring you the most joy. And in that joy column, you'll probably find a lot of those likes in there, right? And we're trying to maximize the joy column while also balancing the other two. And you can line them up. You can draw lines between them. And you can do this with your partner. It's pretty straightforward. And just reflect on that for a moment. A lot of people, what we're building up to here, PK, a lot of people have kind of got to this point. But what we're building up to here is basically like a vision board, or some might, if you're in like an Asian culture, might be like a life plan where you have like, in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And this is not necessarily like, this is on my piece of paper, now I'm going to do it and I have to do it. This can change, it will evolve through time, all of those things. And it wasn't until I started thinking about this sort of stuff that I realized, I'm kind of doing a lot of the things that I wanted to do anyway. B, there were some changes that I needed to make it work, and I'm still making them to get more work-life balance. C, my relationships with my friends and family really took a toll because I was, like I said, inertia was just pushing me forward in business to keep focusing on business. And what was the expense or the cost? The cost was those relationships. And so I realized that those relationships needed to be repaired because those were on my likes, friendship was something that I value. So like that was on my list. So I could sense, like I could have this introspection and be like, I could see this all on paper and be like, okay, I'm going in the wrong direction here, but this is really good. This part here, I want to focus more of this on this stuff. And this wasn't all me just coming up with this. Like I worked with a psychologist on this and for probably a year and a half. And I also work with a life coach. And the life coach sits down with you and they give you something. And I've just got it in a piece of paper here for people that are watching. It's just like a little simple round, like a pie chart. And then it's got things like your relationships and money and all these things in there. And you give yourself a score. So it's literally them just saying, how would you score yourself for these things? And the thing is, I can't come out here and be like, well, everyone should go and be a doctor because you'll make more money and you'll get work-life balance, even though that might not be true. So the best thing that this is what makes the answer to this question hard is that everyone is different. And we end up in things because of that inertia, which is driven by those limiting money beliefs. Like a good one is like, oh, you need to work hard and you need to save money. Well, maybe not. Like maybe there's a point in your life where you don't want to work hard and you don't want to save, and that's okay. Like in your early 20s, like, yeah, go and have fun. Don't just go and have fun. But so everyone is different. And I think when we kind of break free of those limiting beliefs, like those shackles that hold us back, and we actually take time to look at these things, I think that's the way we become more intentional with money, with our careers and relationships and all those things that truly matter to our happiness.
Right. I'm going to forgive me in advance, but I'm going to step this up a second and like ask him maybe an even more challenging question, because through deductive logic, this is kind of the next step. Okay, so let's assume that I have engaged a life coach or some sort of therapy, which, by the way, I'm a huge proponent of. I get myself as well. I have a therapist who's completely revolutionized my money mindset, my scarcity habits, all that kind of thing. Let's say I've done that, really solid inner work, and I'm like, okay, this next 10 years of my life is about wealth creation. This is about wealth creation. I'm happy to devote the time to it. I'm happy to devote the energy to it. My family is supportive. Everything else is in balance. I'm all good. But now I'm in analysis paralysis mode. How can I make money? There's different avenues. I can start a business, I can get a better job, a higher paying job, I can invest in the stock market, I can do index funds, I can do property, I can do fixed income. There's unlimited ways by which you can make money. And it's really rich of podcasts like myself to go really deep in property and say, guys, property is the way, you can get ahead, but it might not be right for everyone, right? Based on their risk appetite, based on, just themselves. Like, how can people actually figure, I'm not asking you to tell people what the correct strategy is, but how can people figure out what is the correct strategy, what is the right path, or what is the right blend of strategies? Once again, I'm not asking from a financial perspective, but from a mindset, from a mental framework. But how do people approach that and just get out of that constant overthinking, and then watching other people get successful, and and that just builds more pressure on themselves?
Yeah, it's a great point. There's these two schools of camp. There's one that believes people make decisions, 80-20 decisions, those really quick decisions. And then there's the others that are the really discerning thinkers. And those are the ones that can't decide between SPC or Heinz or the home label baked beans. And they're all the same thing that has come in a different wrapper, right? So, that's kind of controversial. Some people that love baked beans will be like, well, hold on a second. There's different, I guess there's different courses for different horses in this respect. And I think a lot of people, at least in the investing context, are really guilty of overthinking things. And so we have kind of I heard something this morning from an investor who I was interviewing, which was really cool. He said he basically subscribes to this idea that the ideal investment strategy is the one that of least regret. No matter what you do, you're going to have regret. So if you cast your mind forward, you could invest in a property. Well, what's the thing there? Well, maybe I've got, a commitment to property management, or maybe there's debt that I need to service, so it keeps me in my job or whatever. If I invest in shares, well, I've got to deal with the volatility. It seems like a steeper learning curve. If I start my own business, well, there's just the biggest commitment I could probably make. The upside's there, but the chance that it survives after 5 years is less than 40%. So, all of these different things, you start rattling these things through your mind. Now, it's a bit hard because you can't always dip your toe in the water with certain things like this. You can do that with shares, where you can just try it. You can try before you buy. Just you can even invest at $5 these days. You just put some money into some ETFs, see how you feel. If you go with property, well, there's ETFs and real estate investment funds, you can put $500 in, but it's not the same experience. And then with property, with a business, you can do a side hustle or something like that. And ultimately, I think the best way to think about this is your time constraint. And I don't mean obviously we're talking, time horizon is different to time constraint. So time horizon might be well, you don't invest in shares unless you're a 5 to 10 year view minimum. But what I'm talking about is time constraint. So what do you have the time and capacity to do? So for me, I realized early on in my life that if I was going to start a business like the one that I've started, and I was going to give myself to it, and it took 4 years without a wage, I didn't take a wage, I could probably only do that really early in my life because I had the time. My human capital was basically unlimited, to 24 hours a day, of course, but that was basically unlimited. But my financial capital was minimal. I think I had 100 grand when I started Rask, and that was I've only ever taken 120 grand into the business, but that was basically my option. So I could do it early and do it hard, do it early, because then I knew that if I made a big mistake and it didn't work out, I've lost a few years, I've got the rest of my life to recover and go and get a job. Now, when I have kids or I have the mortgage, I didn't have that same flexibility because I simply couldn't take that risk. So I realized, well, in order to prioritize my strategy, I knew which one I could do at certain times of my life. And so when we come back to this vision board thing, when you construct that vision board, what I realized, PK, is that there are certain things that I can only do in my 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. A lot of those things that were in my 20s are now long gone. So I do have some regrets there. But, now in my 30s, I realized there are some things I want to do. One of those personal things is I want to run a marathon in under 3.5 hours. I've never been able to do that. I'm probably Maybe I can do that in my 40s and 50s, but probably not. I'm going to guess. There'd be people listening to
Yeah.
be like, I done it. But yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so again, that's an illustration of a personal life goal that has to be prioritized. So I would say to anyone that's sitting down and weighing up their options is, one, go and look at the best, like go and study what you need to study to find out what is the entry point for these investment strategies. Number two is that your career when you're early on is the best way to make money. And by that I mean your first $100,000, the best way to get to $100,000 is to increase your income, like to earn more, get a bigger shovel, so to speak, and
Yeah.
then start throwing the money away. But after that, then it becomes, well, how do I make smarter moves? And finally, think about the time constraints. Like, what can you do at what point in your life and what can't you do? Like, you probably can't go straight like 2 feet jumping straight in the water into a startup business if you've got 2 kids and a mortgage. So that would probably be the constraint that you apply to that scenario. And I think through that journey, you're going to discover what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Shares aren't for everyone, property isn't for everyone. So there is something out there, but just try it.
Yeah, that's really sage advice. You do have to try it, but like you said before, you can't. It's not so easy to dip your toes and everything. So it's really
Yeah.
solid advice from you in terms of understand your situation, where you are in your life cycle, your time constraints, etc., and kind of be a little bit strategic. It's a subtle thing. Like people might listen to this and be like, "Oh, I don't know if that was useful," but if you really think about it, that might create for you a proper platform off which to launch instead of going on the wrong, helipad and like catching the helicopter to complete incorrect destination. At least get on the right helipad is the way that I've very obscurely understood that.
Yeah.
One of my last questions here, and I wanted to ask you because you have this. I mean, it's powerful. You have this audience of like, hundreds of thousands of unique listeners. You probably have like an archetype or like tip. Of course, there's a wide spectrum of people who probably listen or watch you, but there's probably like an average kind of like typical person that watches you and gets a lot of like benefit. My question was, what is the I assume you get feedback from your audience as well. What is the advice that you've given them, or what is the practical suggestions that you've given them that they have then replayed back to you and said, that is from all the podcasts that you've done, from all the content that you've produced for them, that is what changed my life, or that is what steered me on the right direction. I don't know if you can give any like success stories just to inspire people. I'm really interested in like the golden nuggets, which was really the aha moment for your audience.
Yeah, it's definitely dollar cost averaging. So that just means investing each and every month without fail. We tell all of our members to automate everything that they can. So that's down to the point like we use a broker where it pulls money from your account after it knows you got paid, and it instantly puts it into an ETF portfolio that our members follow. So we have like a membership service that people can subscribe to for like $9.99 a month. And it basically lays out like the building blocks of what we call a core portfolio. And what people discover is they go to like membership services, managed funds, financial advisors, whatever. And then they come to us and they're like, so that's how simple it is. Like,
that sounds too easy.
Yeah. And it's literally, people often come to us, pay us $9.99, see which ETFs we recommend, go and put the automation in their own accounts, and then just cancel the subscription, and away they go forever. And that's probably the big thing is like, we have some rules at Rask, which whenever we produce content, PK, one of the rules is that we must always leave the listener or leave the reader or leave whoever rocks up to our event, they must leave feeling better than when they came to us. Now, that's very different to every other financial thing that you come across, which is like property price is going to fall 30%, stocks down, bloodbath here. Like if anyone in our team ever did that, they would have to politely look for another job, because that's not what we do at Rask. What we do is we leave people feeling better and optimistic about their future, because so much of the world is already negative enough. And so what people truly love about us is that we cut through all the BS and we leave you feeling like you are doing the right thing. Even if you overspend, even if you lose money on an investment, you're still doing the right thing. And that is, you care about your financial future. You're not just sticking your head in the sand and saying stocks are like gambling, or, I don't have enough money, like all these limiting beliefs. You leave feeling better. And our audience comes back to us and they say, oh, and the stock market's down. You know what? I just went and bought more shares. Or, oh, and you said to avoid excessive leverage because it's something that can hurt you. And those are the things like that just resonate. And you know this, PK, because you lived in this world that I live in, and you saw it. And you saw that you don't need all that junk. Like, you don't need all the crap that comes with finance. There's some very simple principles, like invest regularly and invest for the long term. And that's the one thing that our audience keeps coming back to us with is, thank you for helping me do that.
Yeah. I think that's what people love about Rask, and that's also what people love about these titans of the industry, like Warren Buffett. Like he says, start early, live long. It's just these kind of, axioms. There's just eternal truths that you can fall back on in times where, you're kind of nervous, you're a little bit anxiety about your financial future. And I think that's what people gravitate towards in terms of content producers as well. There's that saying, right? Like, no one really cares how much you know until they realize how much you care. And I think that I haven't listened to every single podcast that you've released, but the content that I have followed, it kind of does come across that way. It's like just non-BS, non-emotional, non-roller coaster. It's just like, this is it. Like, this will help you take it, or leave it, but this is it, right? This is just the bare bones of how things work. So my last question to you would be a little bit of an existential one, so forgive me once again. But like, if we fast forward like 20 years, what is the one thing that you would regret not doing? In other words, what are you trying to change in your life now? And what is the one thing that you'd pat yourself on the back for doing? In other words, you didn't regret. Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I do. There's kind of two sides to this. So like the thing that I would regret is not investing enough in my relationships. So that's the thing that I will regret. And the thing that I'll be most, I guess, proud of or happy with myself that I did, and this is probably related to the business and it relates to what we just spoke about, is that I genuinely cared about what, like, even if I sell Rask or I close the business down or something like this, I genuinely cared and I genuinely helped people. And the thing that I'll be most proud of is that it wasn't me that did that. It was all the people that I had spoken to who then taught their families and taught their friends. And that's what really needs to happen for change to come. And that's what I'm so proud of, is that community of like-minded people that follow us. And that's the thing that makes me so proud. PK, every time we do one of these events that we run, we're hosting 13 this year, I think, we tend to lose like 50 grand on each event.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one of them this year we might hopefully make some money,
Okay.
but we tend to lose a lot of money. So why do you do it? Well, you do it because you get to feel re-energized, and you get to see people, and you get to see the looks on their faces when they've done something, like they've made a change in their career, or they've saved money, or they've provided for a family member or something like this, or they've donated to the community. That is the reason that I do what I do. And that is what I will be most proud of myself for doing, at least in a professional sense. I haven't had kids yet or anything like that. So maybe the answer will change in 12 months.
That's so cool. No, I mean, just honestly speaking, just talking with people like you is kind of what gives me energy, just like you talked about there, what energizes you. So I'm really grateful for your time, obviously, today. And I know you've got you had two podcasts and then you have another one. Like, could you just go through how people can find you, and who should try to even find you?
Yeah, sure. So we deal with everyone. You talked about archetypes before. We have two. We have Sky, who's like a near 30-year-old female. She's probably got a kid on the way, or just married. So she would love our Australian finance podcast, which is all about like financial wellness and the intro to investing type stuff. And then we have Ryan, who's our other one, which he's an engineer typically. He's like a tinkerer, someone that likes to see how things work. That would be the Australian Investors podcast. And so we deal with both of those, but we also deal with one of our oldest members, I think was 84. And he was learning how to invest in ETFs. And so like we have all different types of people. We've just started the Australian business podcast, and I just purchased the Australian property podcast as well. So, we do all these types of things where we're just trying to spread the message of financial literacy. It's not really like if you feel like you want to learn, chances are you'll end up on our sites or on our podcasts.
Yeah, that's exactly how I got there as well. But thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time, Owen, and thank you everyone for watching or listening. It was a kind of a different show, but I hope you vibed with it. If you do that inner work, like for me, the big takeaway is like practical strategies are really important, but it all starts with the inner work. I know when you are feeling anxious, if you're not financially happy, you just want to skip, shortcut, fast forward to the actual practical strategy to make money. But honestly, you do have to start from the start. The longest journey starts with the start. So just make time for yourself. I think that is the big takeaway for me. And yeah, I hope you guys got a bunch of value from it. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. And once again, thank you so much, Owen.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me, PK.